technology is an enabler to deliver business value. Business value is delivered by business capabilities. So if you focus on what the business capabilities are, they haven't changed over the years. The technology has, but at the end of the day, you ingest data, you store, you compute it, you transform it, you visualize it, you consume it, you manage it. That's it. There's not much more to it than that.
It seems like now we make it a lot more complicated than that.
Exactly.
So Chris, thank you so much for coming on the Ken's Nearest Neighbors podcast today.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a good party the other day where I got the invite. So we have to thank Zach for having a birthday to cause this to happen.
Exactly. So shout out to Zach Wilson. His 29th birthday was the other day, and that made this podcast with Chris Tabb available. Also, Joe Reese is a fellow friend. I think you're staying at his place right now.
I'm squatting at his place at the moment.
Exactly. They both get the assist on this interview. So a little background. You're the CCO and co-founder of LEIT Data. I know you from traveling all around the world, going to all these conferences, speaking to such incredible people, and I'm grateful that you could make a little time in your busy schedule to chat with little old me. So one thing I really like to do to get the audience familiar with who you are and your story is I'd like to sort of rewind things and learn about the first time you got experience with data. Like what was your reason for getting into the data field? Was it a pivotal moment, or was it more of a slow progression?
So I think, like many things in my life, by accident, I think it would be some description. So I mean, rewind a bit further. So I didn't go to university, studied computer science. I didn't quite finish college either as well. I was studying in UK. You have advanced A levels, as they call them. So like advanced high school. So I was doing maths, economics, accounts. I had about law as well. I realised law wasn't really my thing. Words more difficult. Numbers came easier to me. But I dropped out of that. I had the first job was like a dead end job, just filling in while I had to pay the bills. And then I landed a job at Cognos. So anyone that hasn't heard of Cognos, it's been absorbed into IBM now. But at the time, this is in the 90s, it was sort of the state-of-the-art reporting visualization tool, and OLAP, where OLAP was born. OLAP being online analytical processing, so being able to slice and dice your data in a very fancy spreadsheet on steroids is probably how to describe it. But that was in the 90s. I was just working in the admin department. But each time they had courses available, they want to make sure that they looked full. So they'd go and get anyone that was in the company to go and take any spare seats and go and take them. Before long, I'd taken every single course that they had available. Then I was actually started. I was working the finance director. I wanted to go and try what I'd learned on the courses with some real life experience. I got some back in the day some CSV exports from the finance system, and I'd gone and built a multi-dimensional cube. Let's say a spreadsheet on steroids back then, which was able to slice and dice, look at different levels of hierarchy, look at the values in it, and find insight. And I think the finance director came up, walked behind me. Back then, I had really long hair. I was probably an ex-raver, probably back then, I don't know what we call it. But I was. Who's this guy? What are you doing? I thought, I'm just doing this. This OLAP cube. Where's your data from? Is it your data? And before long, I became a finance analyst working for him, looking at using some of my accountancy knowledge. Doing stuff on their double entry bookkeeping, looking at stuff of the finance of the department. Before long, I was asked to go and work for the service department. So I understand the training department and the professional services department. And then after a few more years, I built an internal data warehouse there. I think I must have annoyed pretty much everyone in Cognos that was working in the IT team. That asking them that, how do you do this? What's his ODBC driver? Connectivity to the database. And I probably asked too many questions. A lot of people. I was seen as that probably back before Shadow IT was called Shadow IT. I was that annoying person of business that was treading on their toes and trying to move into the IT department. But a good friend back then, Rob White, if you've ever listened to it, he actually helped. Rather than put me to one side or just think, oh, God doesn't know what he's doing. He gave me advice. before long, I'd become sort of like one of the go-to people for any knowledge on their own products. Then went on freelancing just as a guns for hire contractor, working as a front end developer, front end reporting tool, specializing in Cognos. And I think this is where I think the advice for anyone I give out there is that it's that journey you go on of learning it. So once I'd learned how the reporting tool went, I went, how's the data get there? Why is it not reported? Why is it not coming fast enough? Or, how can I make it quicker? How can I put it in a structure that makes it easier to use? So then that took me on to the database part for a bit. So I did a bit of DBA, understanding Oracle 8 back then, and SQL Server 6 version, or SQL Server 6, which was actually born from Sybase. So that then back then there wasn't so many. The tool now, the modern data stack, if you see the pictures now, is that thousands of tools out there. You didn't have that number of options out there. So when you learn something, it was there was only 3 or 4 vendors. So it was SQL Server back then. It was Oracle, Sybase to some degree, and DB2 a little bit less. But you got to understand how databases worked. And then it's like, how do you get the data into the databases? How do you actually get it into a structure that is usable? And that's when I started obviously learning about Inman and Kimball. And I probably super excited. That's how sad I am. I met Bill Inman the other day for the first time, thanks to an introduction by Joe at the Day-to-Day Texas. But those people were the thought leaders back then of how to do these data warehousing. He was the godfather of data warehousing. So followed his methodologies, Inman and Kimball. It was really took what worked well for the particular client you're in. Then looked at ETL tools. Okay, I need to learn that. Understand how to get it from one place to another. Not saying I was the best at any of these things. But I was pretty ETL. I could hold my own. Actually, I'm not going to call myself an expert DBA, but I could hold my own there. But just getting enough of those foundational skills to then go to conversation and so I'll say it's cool bullshit when someone says it. Hold on, I know how that works, or I know how to actually do this. And having that bigger picture, I moved into more architectural roles. So I'm at my own with a whiteboard and a pen, marker pen, of drawing out designs. I went old school this morning actually with some design with the team. But just drawing out and actually. And I think you mentioned the audience here, just understanding technology. Technology is an enabler to deliver business value. Business value is delivered by business capabilities. So if you focus on what the business capabilities are, they haven't changed over the years. The technology has, and I'll probably talk about the different eras I put them into. But at the end of the day, you ingest data, you store, you compute it, you transform it, you visualize it, you consume it, you manage it or orchestrate it as well. And that's it. There's not much more to it than that.
It seems like now we make it a lot more complicated than that. Exactly.
So, and I think that's because the technology's been driving this. Let me talk about the three eras as I put them in, because each era has provided something, and depending on which era you entered the market in, depending on how much you've missed before and how much maybe you should look to the past to think, okay, well, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. There's many people have solved these problems before. And so I think the first era I call it, mentioning Bill, is the data warehouse era, the beginning I call it. And then it was relatively simple landscape. You had a database, a standard one was Oracle back then. You may have had Informatica as your ETL tool, and you'd probably have Business Objects or Cognos as your visualization tool. 3 different vendors, 3 different components. The database, it did that storage compute. It required a lot of optimization, tuning, and well designed and structured, and a good data model in it as well, because you didn't have the option of putting in bad design and just turning up the dial to in a Snowflake term, 6XL or something to go and compensate for poor design in the first place. So you had to get the best bang for your buck out of the infrastructure. It wasn't cheap. You'd have to put a good cost justification into it for going getting a budget of 4 million to go and buy yourself a Teradata appliance, an Exadata appliance, or a large Oracle appliance back then. And that you'd have to get that would be serve your whole company. They were very very focused on how much you could put onto it to get your value from it. And you'd have your Informatica to doing or data stage something to do your transformations or your loading of the data, and that ETL, as it was called then, you didn't want to use the underlying horsepower of your database to do all that transformation. So you used to suck it out, put it into an application layer, transform it, push it back in. So that was what I call the beginning era. What it did instill was good data modeling practice, simplified architecture. There are not that many moving parts. What didn't work very well, they didn't move very quickly, weren't very agile, very waterfall projects. Didn't have that CI/CD, continue. The DevOps sort of era didn't exist then. And also it was downstream. It was predominantly led by the business, very much IT versus business, and the two worlds weren't very connected. So then you move on to what I call the big data bubble. I think what one toy elephant did for us did some good things, did some bad things, but Hadoop created data or enabled data to be for the masses. You didn't have to have a big budget for it. Commodity hardware, open source software, but it was very engineering focused. Very much, you needed very good technical skills, and that team wasn't very close to the business now. Whereas the data warehousing team, it was very much a more business led, more requirements focus. This whole put it in a data lake, schema on read, solve all the problem, and that created a scenario where we just had toxic lakes of just people putting files in it, no management of files, no understanding of the data that was in it, tuning it and optimizing it. You could get it to work very, very well for a particular query plan, but was it able to service the varied load that you may have to have on the as part of your data platform? I'll focus on some of the negatives of it. Let's focus on the positives of it. It did introduce that DevOps mentality. It was much more code-based. It allowed a larger audience to get into data that wouldn't have been able to get into it before. But predominantly, they weren't successful.
There was also a technology shift as well, right? Like, if I remember correctly, like Hadoop leverages MapReduce pretty aggressively, and that's that allows for more effective distributed computing, and that is different fundamentally from what was being done in that previous age.
So you could address, hence the name big data. You could address much larger volumes of data, but not everyone had that sort of volume of data. So if you tried to just do your simple sort of aggregated reporting that you wanted to do before, you could do it with like Hive or Impala or something, put an SQL engine on top of it. But what was it always perform? Yeah, it could be if they'd gone and the engineers tuned it for the query path that it was going to come in. But as anyone knows anything about the old data warehousing days, you never understood exactly what path it come in. You had partitioning strategies to understand that people were going via date range or via a company range or via order range or something. But then if you didn't come in via that route, it didn't work very well. And the same thing still existed within the big data world. So yeah, there was a lot of good things that came out with a lot of bad things, a lot of things that were forgotten or not performed. And the main one I blame is the data modeling. I think I'd be called an old dinosaur a few times nowadays, but back then it was like, that what you're doing before in data warehouse, it's gone. That's not how we do it now. It's all done in this, in big data with JSON files and schema on read, and we'll worry about the data model later. It's not a problem. And that way of thinking came into the modern data stack, and obviously the modern data stack, started 2010 probably with BigQuery. 2012, Redshift and Snowflake came about. But what that opened was all the things that the big data era didn't give us. It enabled it now. You had that pay-as-you-go, cheap alternative. Obviously, you start to pay for compute on Hadoop, but then you actually, you're only paying for what you use using these SaaS products. And BigQuery enabled that. Closely followed by those, and then all the other SaaS products like the Looker, the ETL tools like Matillion, Fivetran. Then you had the orchestration tools like Airflow, Dagster, Prefix came around, and then you had the reverse ETL tools. So now you've got all the data in. Now you got to take the data out. I have a bit of beef with reverse ETL is the fact that if I go back to that beginning piece, when we have Informatica or DataStage or Oracle ODI or even SSIS, DTS if you're on SQL Server, you use the same tool to put the data in as you put the data back out, because all you're doing is reversing connections. I've been challenged before by some of these reverse ETL vendors saying, no, it's not the same. There are API contracts. It can be done. There's no reason why the same tool couldn't put data in and data out. And the more recent products, Rivery is one that I work closely with. That can do that ingest and do that reverse ETL as well as orchestrate it. So we're starting to get back to the stage where one product can do multiple steps of it. It's not as fragmented. And that's that evolution. If companies started and bought in, you're adding things on as you go. And if you stepped back now and said, okay, what's the right thing to use at this time that gives me those capabilities? So stepping back from a modern data stack's made up of a few bits of tech. No, it's made up of capabilities that technology supports. Mm-hmm. The more people start thinking of that, the more you're going to be emotionally attached to a technology. Stuck or sticky to a technology, but also make sure you're getting the best bang for buck from the combinations that are needed to deliver that value. I think each era gave us something, but I think the comment that the modern data stack is dead. The modern data stack needed to be modern, and the underlying approaches, the technology, the requirements that we need to do, they haven't changed. So unless anyone comes up with a better name than postmodern data stack, I don't think we should really change it. I think we've run out of good names.
Hyper modern data stack.
Yeah. Or, Arthur's go postmodern data stack. I think I joked around that we should just call it modern data stack 2.0 if the first one went wrong, or if you've had quite a few failures, go modern data stack 10.3 because it was a good Oracle stable release. So it might give reassurance.
I recently released the course that I wish I had had when I was starting out in the data science domain. It's called The Machine Learning Process from A to Z, and I partnered with 365 Data Science to build this. I also worked with my good friend, Jeff Lee, who's one of the most impressive data scientists I know, to get all of the implementation correct. This course is special for a couple reasons. So first, it focuses on the machine learning process. So you go from ideation to data collection to exploratory data analysis, all of the steps to building and implementing a data science project. It's all taken care of for you. We don't focus as much on the algorithms. This is all about getting a project out the door. Next, we've also open sourced all of our code and all of our examples on GitHub and Kaggle. Those are very easily accessible to everyone, including those people who just maybe want to see those and don't want to pay for the full course. In addition to that, we've included all of the resources that we use to build the course, so you're getting multiple different perspectives on every single concept rather than just our singular voice. I view this course as one of the most valuable things that I've put into the world, and I'm excited to hear what you think of it. I've included a discount link in the description for the YouTube video, as well as in the descriptions on all the other podcast platforms. So it seems to me like sort of the flow over time was historically there were essentially three, four vendors.
Yep.
With very clear expectations, but limited capabilities in terms of speed and size.
Mm-hmm.
The second era was very much essentially like homegrown. It's open source in your company. You have to figure out how to use it and build upon it. You can make it exactly what you want, but kind of difficult to enforce. limited in the ability for business and engineers to collaborate because business people don't understand like the tech, basically like stuff you're running on Linux, right?
Yeah.
And then this new data stack, or a more modern data stack, essentially has services for all of the things that they were doing in the second data stack, where we were doing these things at home, and it's making it more accessible to the business again.
Exactly.
But now we have so many different players that it makes it a different problem, rather than, we can do it, but who should we choose to do this, and how does it fit into the rest of the infrastructure that we have?
Yeah, and I think some of the things that have caused that is the ease of getting a new product. Before, if you had to go and spend £10 million to go and get a number of vendors, there was a design up front that you performed and a cost justification. And with the ability for just the marketing department to go and pay as you go on their own credit card, one piece, or a lot of acquisitions or merging of companies or different departments doing different things, you create a much more complex environment much quicker. And I think what's happened now, especially with the downturn to some degree, is people are now questioning the value they're getting from what they're spending. And whereas before money was cheap and there wasn't much focus on it, it was all focused on growth, you throw people at the problem or throw another technology at the problem. And people haven't stepped back to look to say, okay, well, what's the right thing to do? I think Joe refers to himself as a recovering data scientist. I think now I refer to myself as a recovering data architect or an architect. Architect's my passion, what I love doing, but it's a dying art, or it's a lost art to some degree. There's been too much focus on data engineers, and with great book, maybe these are fundamental data architecture is a new book that's needed. But with that focus on engineering, they need to have that architectural vision, that oversight, that direction, that path of where you're going. And with that, engineers won't go slightly in different directions. We'll stay on the correct path, and what you'll end up with is a product that's easier to support, probably more cost effective. I think something I refer to is what happened is when people start getting the bills in, they realize the cloud fairy wasn't paying the bill. Someone at the end of the day has actually got to pay your cloud computing bill, and just throwing a larger computer at a problem. Is it really worth the value you're getting out of that extra compute you're putting on it? Do you need to run it that frequently? We've gone stream crazy to some. We've got to go real time crazy to some degree. And I think another thing I refer to is that I taught a number of the longest pole in the tent. So there's no point streaming to make a decision for all of the things if it doesn't become, you don't get all of the data points you need until the last pole gets in. And so there's no point streaming everything if you've still got to wait for one piece of the puzzle to come back before you can make that decision. Stream things collectively where they collectively add benefit when you can make an earlier decision because you've actually brought the data in quicker.
So it seems to me like now it's moving into a direction when people say the modern data stack, quote unquote, is dead, is that there's consolidation again. Yeah. Right. Where essentially some of these larger companies, for example, Snowflake, they just recently purchased Streamlit, which is a dashboarding tool. It's like, we can build a completely vertical infrastructure. You only have to work with us. Whereas in this previous iteration, it was like, I have this exact problem. I can go to buy any of these 5 exact tools. And it also seems like the initial things that you needed in that first iteration of the data stack, where you have the importance of data modeling, those types of things, that's where people are creating these efficiencies now as we move into maybe more like verticalized infrastructure from some of these companies. Am I sort of
right? I think so that being another good example, like Snowpark being added to Snowflake, and vice versa, Databricks adding Delta Lake as an extension to its ML capability. So I think we are seeing that vendor consolidation. Streamlit being another acquisition by Snowflake focused on, they call it data apps to some degree rather than like the visualization, but still giving visualization capabilities. And I think I referred to something. Data has gravity, and I think the compute has gravity as well. The more you can centralize it, the easier it is to manage. And the less data movement, the less complexity from security aspects, the less technology, less different people need to support it, the quicker you can move. I think, and another thing I like to talk about is delivery friction. So I think friction is a term I use for the associated complexity, time, and effort to perform something. And with a modern data stack, you've probably got 6 pillars of delivering value to your client. And until the client's got that data and they're actually using it, whatever you've built up until now is hidden from them. It adds no value to them. All you're doing is spending money that's coming out of a cost center, and the CFO is probably asking, what the hell am I getting out of this? There's no stakeholders to say, oh, I got this great report doing this, or I just found this insight. Your project's going to wobble and you probably won't get the funding much going forward. So ensuring that you do that thin slice and incrementally adding value while building on some solid foundations, well architected. You'll keep the business stakeholders happy. Your team won't need to be as multi-skilled as needed. You'll be able to move quicker, faster, working smarter. I'll give you some examples. I won't name out technologies, but if we built some data pipelines in the standard modern data stack components that we would have chosen 4 years ago, maybe, I'd need probably a team 1.5, 2 times the size with different skills to deliver the same thing. Now I can deliver in a team nearly half the size. I can either deliver it faster, or I can deliver it. I can deliver it on less money, or with a smaller team.
So it seems to me like there's a lot of benefits from sort of the consolidation, right, of the verticalization. What are some things that, for example, companies should watch out for associated with that?
So I watch out which vendors you're backing, what you've got, the longevity of that vendor. A lot of these companies are still VC backed. How much money they got left until they're either going to be run or acquired. I think the most expensive thing in a data team is the people. And if you have to potentially migrate from one to another, or rip out some architecture or re-architects, because vendors do like to do this as well. I'm not picking on Microsoft, but I'm going to just say Microsoft anyways. Microsoft's data stack has evolved from Azure Data Lake 1 to Azure Data Lake 2.0. They had HD Insight as part of the platform before, which then got swapped out for Databricks now. It had SQL Server as the main part. It's been swapped out by Synapse. Just each of those changes, if you want to stay up to date on your platform, there's no easy migration path for these things. I mean, I suppose that is just one vendor, and you'd like to think one vendor would give you a nice migration path for those. But there's others are just as bad as well. Not just, Oracle would have probably the similar things, and maybe even IBM. But recently, Talent did some acquisitions recently as well. Talent acquired Click, and then before that, Click had acquired Attunity. So you're getting, even when you do get these single platforms, sometimes it's still made up of multiple ones.
So from a company perspective, let's say we need to change infrastructure. Let's say we're a large bank. We have gazillions of transactions that are logged in an antiquated format, in really slow, bad infrastructure. But the cost in the last, let's say 5 years ago, the cost of changing infrastructure is astronomically high. How do you go about making that decision, and how do you actually change over infrastructure into something more modern?
With some good planning would be one. I think don't go big bang. So I've seen many companies that either do a big bang release where they're going to migrate it all in one go back to that, keeping the stakeholders on the journey. You'll lose them on that journey, and by the time you've migrated across, the company's moved or the requirements are moved, and what you've migrated isn't the right thing. And I think it's an opportunity to get rid of some deadwood, get rid of some stuff that's not being used. I'd always suggest, before even embarking on that, you do an audit of what's used. Find out what's out there. Find out your cold data, because data in there has never been accessed for 2 years, or you find out that one person's using it, they run it, save it to Excel, send it to someone that's no longer in the company. So it's having that pre-analysis. I think something else I refer to is KPIs are a big thing, or SKUs, or key indicators in your organization. A lot of them have been built up over time, and not everyone understands why they still have them. I did I think Ron Itterman, was the guy I did this with, I did something about the KPIs of KPIs. So you've got all your KPIs that are being used, hundreds of dashboards in your whole company. And you get the requirements. We've got to migrate across. You think, oh my God, I've got 4,000 reports to migrate. I've got, 20 data marts. I've got 50 terabytes of data. If you start whittling away of that, what's actually used, something that we did in our own company recently as well was we have our company strategy. We know what we need to do. We have our departments. We know what each of them are needed to do. We know how that all links back into our business strategy. I know what metrics I need to capture to get that. So if I'm capturing metrics, I've got KPIs that are not underpinning my business strategy, why am I doing it? They're adding no value. They're not being used for any decisioning. They're an overhead that I no longer need them. Maybe I don't need to migrate them anymore. So understanding, what in your on your landscape is actually being used and what value it provides. Then you cut that down and you go, right, okay, that project that I thought was a 3-4 year project to migrate that, I've just removed like 2/3 of it. I focus on that 1/3 that's left. What's the most important? What's going to be adding me the most value? What's costing me the most? Or what's getting the most? What business stakeholders are moaning the most because they got the worst performance? And then start with that. And I think the other thing is data modeling being a lost art as well of understanding your enterprise data model, understanding who owns each of those parts within your organization, instilling data ownership, owning the quality, the life cycle of it, the security of it. Having that ownership adds so much more value because people care about it. And when people want to know about it, they know who to go to. And we can go on to like data mesh concepts and data product concepts. Unless you've done all that stuff up front, your data mesh product or your data product roadmap is going to fail because you'll get duplication. You'll get
really fun
duplication and not the same amount of value as you could do if with some good planning.
So I think something would be interesting for listeners is kind of breaking down data modeling at the most basic level. I think that's something that goes over a lot of people's heads, and just having a clear explanation of that. Yeah. I think it can help everyone from like a baseline data analyst up to like a freaking CEO.
Yeah. So, data modeling has probably different levels. And I think the first thing is data model adds context. And without context, the data has less value. And if you break down probably the different layers of a data model, so you'll probably have you'll have domain level at the highest level. Domain could be your product domain, could be your customer domain. And products linked to customers somehow. You could have your finance domain, associated accounts will link to products and also to customers. So once you have those domains, you can break down into subdomains. So product type, customer type, or customer classification. And that could be, maybe party rather than customer. Party could be a supplier, it could be a customer. They could be both. And then breaking that down to conceptual or logical, and then down to physical. And business people think in as domain or at logical level. Technology people think at physical level. Being able to broker those two gaps of knowing at what logically fits physically and how that physicalization changes over different technologies is something that will add so much more value to that data because the business understands where it's mastered. And even think that through on business services. So business service, let me give you an example of onboarding a client. So onboarding a client, you're going to need to go and do an address lookup. You maybe need to go and check credit history for them. Each of those steps is either going to reference some data, add or own some additional data, and understanding where that's physicalized in your source system or your OLTP, is really valuable because you can understand where it is. What's happened at the moment is people model their OLTP, your operational system, and then we go remodel our data platform later. The two things are separate activities. And there's so much metadata that's actually captured at the time of doing your transactional system. If that's then reused and you've done a good data model and all good business services that link to that, you've just halved the challenge. I mean, there's so many companies that don't do that. And I'll just go a bit more about physical data modeling as well. So with physical data modeling, talk about OLTPs, talk about analytical platforms. And you'll have different ways of modeling a data for a transactional system. It's designed for fast writes, individual reads of records, very small updates. Whereas your analytical platform, it's for larger volumes of data, aggregated data, merging of data between different data sets, but normally larger volumes of data that occur in. And updates are not normally at a record by record basis, it's blocks of data that have the same characteristics. Well, then data modeling for analytical purposes can have different methodologies, different approaches. I think the Inman, Kimball were from my original era, and then the hybrid of the two. Data Vault being a current standard, but feature modeling now for doing big Y tables for doing machine learning on things. So I think horses for courses is something I say is the right model for the right use case. So
maybe abstracting everything away. I think an example, and correct me if I'm wrong, of data modeling would be just like a simple file structure in a computer. You might have a file structure that suits you to find everything relatively easily, where things are in the way that you built it. I might store the same data in a slightly different way that is leveraged perfectly for my use cases. And good data modeling either allows us to both create a mutual infrastructure that allows us to understand it and search it well, or to have specific offshoots that allow us to look at things in the way that we want to see it best.
Exactly. And I think that's a good, so what you can do is, and I think what data lakes were intended to do, but didn't really work very well. But I mean, what Data Vault does very well, it creates a modeled layer that can be reused with business rules for different purposes. Mm-hmm. So if you're able to create, and with data products as well, and data mesh being another use case for that as well, if you've created a load of data assets that have been structured in a way with predefined paths to join between them, people can mix and match. We used to use the term conform dimensions when we're doing Kimball, and you'd build a dimension that could be reused across multiple data marts. Taking that back to Data Vault, you'd have multiple hubs and satellites that then could be reused to go and create multiple data products for different departments. Coming back to that ownership piece is, at least when the finance department is writing something, they've got to subscribe to the customer information that the customer team owns. And when the customer team go and subscribe to something that the finance own, there's they can mix and match, and you can add those different entities together in a way that you can build something that works for your particular use case. And I think it's all about reusability. And the more you can create reusable assets, not only from a data entity perspective, but a data platform perspective. We've had data catalogs for ages where we've got provided attribution for the columns on a particular table, but we need to start capturing where we're a particular DAG, a particular algorithm, a particular script to go and do users and roles. All of these can be reused, and I think another thing we have I used to be a developer myself. I love developing, and sometimes we as developers, you just like doing something, but sometimes you're reinventing the wheel, and you can go and buy a product or go and subscribe to a framework that already does it better than you anyway. And I think what makes a good data engineer, data architect, data professional is the balance of going, okay, look, yeah, we could build ourselves, but we don't really need to. We could go and And then when you go and select a product based on the capabilities, not on the vendor hype. Look to see, have requirements. I think something that, going back to, like I refer to as the beginning era, you had to have well-defined requirements for you to go and cost up the particular project. The modern data stack, there were less requirements given. It was more, I'll say winging it, but it was trial and error to some degree. The more we actually have the requirements that we need to achieve, going back to business services and capabilities, the more you have that, the more easier it is to move from one technology to another, because you know what you need to move across. I think it's all about abstracting away the requirements and the business services from the technology. Technologies can change over time. The business requirements will change, but they'll change at a lesser speed, depending on your industry or what you're working in, unless you're pivoting. But a car manufacturer's a car manufacturer. And Uber, they're a taxi ride company, or a car ride. So companies don't their core business requirements don't change as quick.
So how does this factor into the work that you do at your company? I feel like that's a pretty good segue.
It is good. I suppose I have a passion for what I do, and I've been doing it all my life, and I'm still doing it. And what's allowed me to really bang the drum about this stuff and shout about it is we built quite a successful consultancy for specialising on the modern data stack and in areas of data strategy, data management, data security, data ops, data engineering, modern data stack. There's some AI and ML, but we're really focused on the foundations to enable that AI and ML to be successful. And something that we've done on that journey is we've built a number of assessment frameworks to help learn from the collective mistakes that I've made myself and my team's made. No one's perfect, but also what we've seen go wrong with our clients, what we've seen go right with our clients, and we can really help fast track that path to success using the right blend of skills needed for your use case. So you're building a team yourself. You only have the option of having them all full-time, and having a full-time architect, full-time principal architect, or principal engineer, and a full-time DevOps engineer. We're able to create the right sort of blend of team that's needed to provide that business value in a cost-effective way with the simplest technology. I think this is probably where I've become a salesperson, but I'm actually a technologist. So I can only really sell what I believe in, and I think that's proven very well for us because there's that trust factor. We are independent. We know there's many options in there. We can shortlist them and show you what's right for you at the right level of maturity, the right part of your journey, and the right budget you got as well, the associated budget, because you don't need to have everything to start straight away.
So what stage do you see most companies struggling at the most? Is it building infrastructure from the ground up? Is it like, we're transitioning? Or is it that, hey, we're choosing between these couple vendors and we want you to tell us which to use?
I think a combination. So I think the first one is getting the right foundations in place. I think the more you spend, and I'm not talking about a 3-month pre-project foundations, building them all. Having a blueprint that someone can provide you and going, look, this is what you need to get to, the speed you get there and the order in which you get to. Let's customize it to you, to your business requirements you got at the moment. You could have a business deliverable. You could have you're moving out a particular data center. You could have end-of-life software that's costing you a lot of money that you need to migrate across. So look at the business initiatives that you've got and look to see what logical order you put them that builds out those foundations. And if you build out those foundations iteratively, adding more value, hardening them, having it as version 1, 1.1, 1.2, where you're adding more things to it. But the key to it is knowing what definition of good looks like, where you're heading towards. And I think, unfortunately, if you go and get a team that, may have not worked together, may have a different opinion, maybe more aligned to one technology or another, you don't get that. And I think something that we've been able to build, me and the team, well, we've got a team of rock stars that either mentor the next generation of data engineers we're bringing on, but also can actually make sure that our customers are going the right direction at the right pace. You talked about my traveling earlier, so yeah, I mean,
so for those who don't know, Chris is he travels more than anyone I probably met. In New York, Utah, Colorado, London, everywhere. It's very impressive, actually. I'm surprised you're still sane.
I don't know where I do wake up sometimes, but I suppose how that started. I mean, COVID caused it to some degree. I mean, the background of the company, so we've been going about 3 years or so. We had our first customer, maybe a little bit more than that now. But we've grown organically. We're in America now, and that wasn't by design originally. That's all organically of how we got in here as well. But during that period, we didn't have an office. I didn't need to be anywhere. I got stuck at a few places while I was going, and I think what's enabled is meeting so many great people. Doing stuff on LinkedIn, talking to you now, coming around to Zach's birthday, hanging with Joe. It's the community part of that has enabled me to travel around, but also the benefits I get from that is speaking to the party of day, chatting to Zach, just listen to his journey at Airbnb, talking to other people that in the industry about their experiences, sharing what's worked for us, what hasn't. The value in that is priceless, and it's enabled me to come around and do these podcasts, go to Day-to-Day Texas the other day, presenting there. I'm doing a podcast tomorrow, going the 14th as well in February. So, the company now is we're predominantly the UK, but we've got approaching a team of about 10 people in the US now, focusing on modern data stack, but certain industries over here: media and entertaining, media and advertising, payment companies, retail as well. So I think the motto I use is, I'm on a quest to make the data world a better place. And the experience I've had over the time of doing this, and the company now being with a great team behind me, I'm able to now focus on sharing my experiences, sharing that knowledge, and for our clients benefiting from my getting to talk to such amazing people in the industry.
Yeah, I see something very similar where every week I'm speaking to someone else who has a different perspective, different experience set than I do, and I get to shape my model of the world off of that. I get to see what worked for me, what maybe works for the other person, what doesn't work for me, and that allows me to evolve my knowledge so it's more well-rounded. We're only able to really talk about the things that we've experienced or what we've seen.
Yep.
And through seeing these or experiencing what other people have gone through, we begin to get a more informed opinion of whether it's a data stack, whether it's life or education or any of these types of things.
Yeah.
Something that did come up, I'm kind of interested, you're saying you're initially working in Europe, you have some clients in the US now. Is there a different philosophy associated with data? So I know that, for example, legislation is very different around data and data privacy. Are there also differences in the types of stacks that they use, or is this more? Is that something that's more uniform?
I think that there are some differences on the tech stack, which there's a bit more Google over here in the US than we see in the UK. So that, and there's probably some of the other tools around that stack have got more of a presence in Europe than in US, but predominantly it's the usual suspects that are in there. I think some data modeling practice was bigger in Europe. I mean, Data Vault was been bigger in Europe for longer than it's now. I'm hearing it more and more over in the US, where I didn't hear it as much. Probably a couple of years ago, I didn't hear it as much here. I think the ways of working I was in it, US seems to be much happier to throw people at the problem than the UK. I don't know if that was the larger budgets you had over here, but yeah, it was definitely we definitely didn't see the sort of bloating size of teams that I've seen over here in some companies. But predominantly, we're pretty much the same. I mean, America, they spell data modeling different than the UK data modeling, which caught me out when I created a hashtag, bring back data modeling, and then I realized that it's spelt differently. So yeah. There's some things are different, but I think the core values and the core problems I see are the same.
That's fascinating. I think that at a fundamental level, we see a lot of the similar things, but on like a superficial level, how organizations are run is usually a little bit different. And it's kind of cool to see that the modeling and somewhat the tools and the underlying concepts are consistent.
Good job. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to break into America as easy. Exactly. I'd have to relearn everything again.
Or maybe you bring some best practices if across the pond you're doing a little bit better. But
and I think something that resonated, just you said a minute ago, was the fact that doing these things you get to learn. I know the days of me doing hands-on coding, even though I was doing some coding the other night very early in the morning, but just because I missed it. But it's very rare for me to get back on the tools, but what I love is talking to my team, either the juniors or the more senior, what they're doing, how they're using it, and I learn via that now. I think I probably I never imposter. I probably say I have imposter syndrome of like that. I don't know as much as people may think I do, and I prefer it that way, and I always would want that because I'd always want to continuously learning. I think the day I stop learning will be the day I become an arrogant person, and I don't. Even though some people may think I'm there already, I'd like to think I'm not. I'm modest and humble is what I like to say still, but some people disagree.
Well, I think that concept of that you brought up earlier of knowing enough to call bullshit on things. Yeah. At the stage you're at now, that's the most important skill. Yeah. Right. You don't have to index on like being able to build a pipeline or anything like that anymore. It's about saying like, oh, that won't work. Yeah. Or like, why are we doing it this way, and asking the right questions. And I think that's like the evolution of the skill anyway. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's important to have some technical background, some infrastructure, but as you scale up, there are other things that are significantly more important to index on. I would imagine like selling is probably the most important thing. Right now.
And it's, I think, so go back to that delivery friction thing I talked about, is that, everything has a frequency of change, and the same thing with your whole way of working. It's you optimize the parts that are going to give you the most benefit and for the least amount of value as well. There's no point focusing on optimizing the hell out of something you do once every 2 months, because it's not going to give you the value. I think that value thing is an interesting thing as well, and the whole FinOps focus now as well. So FinOps is financial operations of really focusing on the cost of the spend of your platform, and where DevOps gave us that operation and development teams working together. Now it's that finance and operation teams working together. So you can start to recharge the particular departments for the cost that they get, so they're accountable for it. Go back to that, I think about the cloud fairy that people, thought of people paying the bill. When these large bills come in from, your Snowflake compute or your Redshift compute or whatever you're using, if you're not able to actually associate that to a cost line, a cost center, to a department, no one really wants to go and pay for it. And then when it comes to that renewal thing, no one wants to pay for renewal, doesn't get the funding, you don't innovate, you don't move forward. And something that I've got a bit of a bugbear about is this whole OPEX, CAPEX world. So, OPEX is great. It comes at your budget, that particular year. You don't have to go and get, request funding for it, which was great. But that higher OPEX you get, the lower your profit's going to be. And with bloat without any controls on it, you don't know how to like bring it back in. And the other factor I don't like about is the accounting rules as well. So whereas you bought that appliance before that you write it over 5 years, and then the development team that may have written your SAP interface for it again, it's written over, seemed to follow whatever the hardware was, and that's not right, I think, nowadays, because I'll give you an example of a supply chain management company. So you're a big distribution company, you've gone and bought SAP to go and put it in. SAP's cost you, a big chunk of cash. That's going to be sitting on your books as an asset, and you're going to write it over 5 years. The very expensive SAP consultants that are working on it, you're probably going to write their effort in doing that. They go and deliver this, and then your data team, they're going to go and optimize maybe that supply chain management process. So they go and create some pipelines from different systems. They go and get planograms, maybe from the warehouse, or maybe from the Target supermarket. They've worked out pallet distribution of how they're going to put things onto the pallet. And then they run some algorithms, and they've worked out that by loading the pallets in a certain order, by loading them onto the truck in a certain order, by making the truck do a certain route that it unloads them, and making them put the pallet in a certain location within the store, they've now reduced the amount of miles that people have to walk now to load the shelves by 50%. The most expensive cost you've got is people. You've now just saved the wage bill for it by 50%. All that cost that you've gone and you've put into that development of that really fancy algorithm that's done all that, it's OPEX. You've just done it in that particular year. It's on top of some cloud architecture. Unless you can link it back to the business process to say, right, this process is happening and it's an operational expense, that's when it becomes capital expenditure. So I think the data world's hasn't done itself favors with so many failed projects. So yeah, people don't see them as strategic and as capital expenditure because we keep changing our technology so often. We keep having to rebuild it. We come up with a new fad. We're going to have post-modern data stack, and we'll throw away our modern data stack. Or and we're really not focused on what is the value and making it transportable, putting that business logic in a way that it is transferable to another technology and platform easily.
Well, I think that CapEx, OpEx example, it shows how much more than just like performance a lot of decision making is. Yeah. Right. There's plenty of things. I remember I was working at a very large like manufacturing company, and essentially one of the models we were building, it created no value in the short term, but the projected value would save them like a lot of money in taxes. Yeah. Right. And it's like, this isn't
no
real.
brainer.
Yeah. This is not, but it's not like a tangible thing. Like we aren't, this model like might not work and it might not do that, but you're actually saving money from it in taxes this year. Yeah. And it was very interesting. It's like, this projection, which is just a projection, it doesn't have any like real world utility until it's put into play. Before it even is put into play, is saving tax dollars. Yeah. And I was like, wow, like I guess that's enough justification to do the model. And we also have the conflict between cost savings and like revenue generation. Yeah. Right. Essentially in data engineering, we're almost exclusively focusing on cost savings. Yep. Whereas maybe more on the data science machine learning side, we're focusing on revenue generation, which has very different budgets and different philosophies on how they get funded. And I think that's something a lot of people really overlook is how much those things factor into the decision making around.
And I think you just highlighted something is how budgets are allocated. So and if when larger companies, you got your chief analytical officer, he goes and get his ML budget. You go and get your chief data officer, your CTO or CIO. He's going to go his budget for his part. One isn't success. Well, the machine learning AI one can't succeed without the other one. Yeah, and because they got different, and normally the AI and ML one gets it because it's shinier, it sounds better, and you're going to get a bigger budget.
We're going to make us this much money. It's like, we'll save you the same amount of money.
I've never seen people so happy to give money for a data quality or data governance project. Here you go. Here's £5 million for that data quality, data governance project. Oh yeah, no, I don't think that's not going to get signed off. I've got an AI and ML thing that's going to give us X times revenue, and it's unproven and I think it's the same in marketing department. I shouldn't say that because I run the marketing department, but it's much easier to get budget and sign it off again. Yeah, I'm going to get this much from this event, and we do track it ourselves and we keep ourselves real. But when it's very easy, it's much easier to get something that is forward forecasting, that is unpredictable than when you've got some real facts to say, so I can save you money, but there's only so much money can be saved anyway, because I'm not as if I'm going to save 80% of what's there. So you're already limited by the benefits that you can claim on an optimization project, because you can only optimize what's there. Exactly. Whereas you can sell the dream, you can sell the magic for something that doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's funny how that works. Well, Chris, those are all the questions I had. How can people learn more about you? What do you have coming up in the pipeline? Cool. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So Hashtag mean data streets is something that I go by. You'll find me on LinkedIn, Chris Tabb. There's not many of us, so I don't there's no more than that. What have I going on? So I say there's a podcast next week. I think the next big thing that I'm doing, and anyone in Europe that likes skiing or even wants to travel to Europe, I've got an event called SKID, Skiers in Data. First ever conference combining skiing and data. We've got some of the best thought leaders coming along, talking, and me hosting it. So I'm hosting the journey of the modern data stack. We're starting off with the evolution of it, but then talking through many different aspects of how you get the value. So it's an opportunity for anyone out there that wants to not learn by the mistakes of others. Look at that simplified view of the modern data stack. Our company's LEIT Data, so follow us on LinkedIn. I'll follow the company on LinkedIn. Website's www.leit-data.com. Follow me on LinkedIn. All the hashtags.
Amazing. All of your links I'll put in the description of the video, as well as in the description on all the main.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much, Chris.
No, it's been a blast.
This was awesome.
Great, thank you.